So yeah, man.
Weren't you kind of
Yeah.
you were kind of segueing into Malignant? I wanted to hear how that was going to
Okay, so it's been said that the film that we're going to cover is a homage to this genre of movie. Everywhere that I looked when I saw the early reviews, they're just like, Dario homage, Giallo homage, and this seems to be an homage to that genre. This is James Wan's Malignant, a HBO Max theater simultaneous release that came out last week, and has been met with a lot of controversy, man. I think this film is it kind of, people are kind of on the fence about it.
It's like an actual conversation piece. Every now and then one of these movies comes out and you can find people hating it for the same reason that other people love it. It's like, and you can tell when that's like part of the movie itself is that some people are reacting to the very same thing in a negative light that other people are saying, oh my God, I loved that about this movie.
Right.
So and that just makes it like, I couldn't wait to talk to you guys about this movie, but you should get us started, Steve.
Would you deem it controversial or just like conversational?
I'd say controversial.
I would say divisive.
Okay.
I would say divisive.
Yeah, I'd say divisive. I say controversial just because, like, I think sometimes when horror films sometimes have a one size fits all, specifically for like the more popular films. James Wan's film is going for something very specific, and if you aren't on board, I feel like you'll be tortured for 2 hours.
Right. The reason I ask is like that line of thought is accurate. I agree with you. And I think that like it's kind of what makes it even more, I don't want to say shocking, because like I'm probably on the side that like, enjoyed the movie more than most people did. And I feel like what's a little more shocking about it is like what you're describing just now about like the feelings of certain horror films is that like James Wan is kind of like a poster boy for a lot of those movies. Like you look at what he's done and like, what he's done to shepherd like Saw and Insidious and The Conjuring, like all these, I mean, I don't know what each of them has done, but billions of dollars at the box office. And, a lot of mainstream moviegoers, like, if you asked 10 people, like, what's your favorite like horror movie of the past 10 years, there's a really good chance that a lot of people will say something maybe from one of those three franchises, especially with mainstream audiences. So I think that's even more, that's what makes this more of a conversation, I think, is the fact that it is from James Wan, who has made, some of the more popular and some of the better horror movies of the last 10 plus years. And, is definitely one of the most successful filmmakers working today. And I think that is kind of what afforded him the opportunity to make this movie to begin with, obviously.
Oh, definitely.
Especially coming off of like, $1 billion Aquaman movie and, doing, what did he do? Furious 7? Did he do 7? Yeah, I think he did the 7. The one that was the one that Paul Walker passed away during. But I mean, this guy's made billions of dollars for these studios and, specifically WB, he's done a lot with them, with the horror genre and with Aquaman. So, we talked about this a lot over the last, year, even like talking about these movies that were coming day and date, him having a movie to be one of them. And just kind of being, we talk about James Wan, we talk about, Mike Flanagan, we talk about who's our other horror, Jordan Peele, these directors in the genre space that we just love. And like, it's just immediately you're just like, yeah, I'm going to watch it, whether it's good, we'll figure that out. But like, I've already bought my ticket for these movies. So I think that's really what makes it so interesting, because it does feel like a bit of a flex, for somebody being able to make whatever they wanted to make because of box office success from prior movies. And like, obviously he's heavily influenced by these movies, this genre that you're describing. And, there's been traces of it in some of his other movies too. And I think what's also interesting is that like whatever homage this is to that genre, this movie also is really a James Wan movie still as well.
Yeah.
Like there's so much of this movie that really made me feel like a lot of like Saw was like, I felt like was all over this movie.
To the point of like, I mean, again, and we're going to talk spoilers later, so don't worry, folks. We might refer to the tone of this movie. We might say something like about the third act having some crazy stuff in it, but we're not going to say any more than that. But I would say that this movie, like, and to the point where I'm actually wrestling with, I don't know how much of this movie is self-parody, like deliberate self-parody, because so much of this stuff is the James Wan stuff kind of amped up. Like, and there are weird little improbable things. Like there's like an establishing shot of this old hospital. I think it's an old hospital. That's like a fucking Transylvanian castle, you know? And the opening scene is like something out of, I don't know, like Darkman or something. I mean, there's these weird, or like the Doc Ock scenes with the operation room and stuff. Sam Raimi kind of feel. So I don't know. I just kind of feel like this movie is sort of all over the place. And I'm not taking anything away from James Wan to say, though, that there's no trace of that kind of prankster playfulness necessarily in his earlier movies. I think that what we saw before was his glee with like amping things up and surprising people. And like you said, whether you like Saw or not, that movie kind of defined horror for a certain number of years. Insidious, a movie that I think I like a lot more now than I did when it first came out, but definitely set the tone for a certain kind of movie, and also was very successful in its own right. And then you have the Conjuring films, which is like a mega franchise, you know? So obviously he does have these ways of like seeing where the genre is going, but what he's made here is a movie that like is marketed to get you in the door as this is the next James Wan exploration of horror. And what he's actually presenting is something that I think it's almost hilarious how much like traditional horror fans could be put off by like how this movie goes. This movie does not really try to scare you. I think there are a couple of moments that play pretty scary, but outside of that, it made me think much more of this sort of quasi thriller action mixture that you got like in Lee Whannell's Invisible Man movie. In fact, it has a lot in common with that movie in a certain way, plot wise. There's certain beats, but it's so much so that I felt like this movie was doing an amped up self-parody that even my own reaction the first time through of going like, I don't know if I'm buying this. This is kind of silly, or this is kind of dumb or whatever. And then going, but there were little hints of them knowing what they're doing. I don't know. I think there were certain things that didn't work for me about this thing and certain things that did, but it's definitely it's a James Wan movie through and through. It's an interesting movie for James Wan to make because he could be burning up some of his like straight horror cred with the people who kind of came into this wanting either another Conjuring or another Insidious, you know?
Right.
If you were careful, you did notice like this trailer though did hold back. The way this film was marketed, it really just sold you on James Wan, sold you on certain imagery. So you knew there was something coming, some twist, some surprise. And then I think this movie is like, oh, you wanted like a twist and a surprise? Well, things that you might have been able to guess, and especially if like me, you've read a lot of horror fiction, there's all kinds of crazy stuff that happens in horror fiction that they never put in horror movies, because in order for audiences to stay like bought into it, you kind of have to cut down on a certain amount of schlocky kind of crazy stuff. But this goes into that zone. It's kind of like the way Matrix, when it came out, if you were a sci-fi fan, you already knew about the kind of brain in a jar philosophy of like a false reality, and you don't know what your physical being is actually doing. I think this movie takes certain things that like horror fans might be familiar with though, and like thrusts it into this. It's a $40 million movie. I mean, this is not a cheap movie. This is a James Wan movie. This is totally the movie they let you make if you're in between Aquamans for a big studio. And they're like, go have fun. Because this movie really doesn't seem like it's, I mean, I don't know. I haven't heard anything about the cinema score, but this seems like the kind of movie that could have a really low cinema score simply because the trailer plays it straight. And the movie is not, it's not straight down the middle at all. You looking at
I think it was I think it had a C cinema score.
Okay. So
which is not as bad as it could have been. I mean, like,
you
know, you've got Hereditary and like movies like that got like D's or whatever it was, like historically like low. But I mean, just a quick note. Let's also just pay some respect, because Insidious is the start of this podcast.
I know. That's one of, you know,
it all starts with Insidious.
There's one scare in that I've always thought was great, the monster behind the crib. And I've come to terms with other things about it. I think I like all the actors in it more now than I did when that movie came. I don't know. There's just something about certain movies, you know, you've come towards them in your aesthetic or I think I would enjoy that one more now. I also think Malignant, even though, like I said, it didn't necessarily work for me overall, I also thought, man, this would have been so much more fun in a crowded theater. rather than sitting there watching it with my wife, who admittedly is not that much of a horror fan. And so her reaction a lot of time is like, kind of the questions I'm saying about that this movie's going to make you ask, even if you are a horror fan, which is this trying to be funny? Is this trying to be goofy? Like, and I also think that some better acting in a couple of places would have helped. I found the lead very dreary, and I just didn't think she just didn't really register for me. And I also thought the two cops, the female cop was a little bit better, but there was just, it just felt half baked. All the stuff with the cops at the station. In fact, the way the cops come in and the conversations they had, it felt like a 10-year-old's idea of what cops would say when they come into a crime scene. It's like, is he our guy? Looks like it's our guy. Boy, I've kind of got a crush on you. Oh, you. I mean, it just felt silly. And I think you can have silliness in a schlocky movie like this. I'm just saying, I think had the acting been like really good, a lot of those elements would have just been amazing in a movie that's willing to go there. Because this movie is really, I mean, you seem to know what I mean about the genre stuff, Steve. It's like, it's really not trying to hit the usual notes that this type of movie tries to hit.
And it does feel like, I mean, like there is a question of like intent and whether some, and I mean, I kind of feel like I fall on like the intentional piece. Like I really do feel like some of this feels pretty intentional, like really kind of playing into the genre that Ronald's given us the history on. It's like some of those movies in this genre really do feel like this movie does, like, very like poor acting and like overacting, and like even like some of the blocking and the shot setups are kind of like not like what you normally see in some of James Wan's movies, even though you still do hear and feel like his voice in this film. I don't know. I kind of have coming away from it for a few days. I'm just like, I've kind of settled into like it feeling like those movies that I would pull off of a shelf in a video store, like because it had a cool cover, and I'm like, wow, that's like kind of like not a great movie, but I kind of really dug it.
Right.
And I don't know that I'm that high on this, but I'm definitely not in the idea of like that was like horrible, or like this divisiveness that we mentioned earlier, like that you can see on film Twitter or wherever you're looking. I definitely kind of fall more towards the middle positive side of it, of like, I definitely had fun watching the movie. That's for sure. And
I've seen so many people say that they laughed and that they were like, what the hell? Like that. I mean, you would it would have been really fun with a crowd. Like, even not loving it, I thought, oh, wow, this would have been fun. These moments, you could just hear people reacting to some of these scenes. I'm sure we'll talk about them in a second when we get into spoilers, but like those beats that feel like that must have been what they were going for, like that kind of roller coaster ride effect.
Ronald, how does this fit into the Giallo genre?
It fits right in. So here's my thing. I thought I was gonna hate this movie, and something else happened.
I could tell. Yeah.
Something else happened. Like halfway through, there's no way that a guy with such a sure hand could make a movie like this and not intentionally make some of this campy. Like it just,
I kind of feel the same.
It felt so campy that it became so fun, and her acting was it felt intentionally kind of like, we need you to be like the intense eyes, always like colorless in the middle of everything being very colored. I fucking had a ball with this movie. I would show this movie to anyone if they wanted just a bunch of laughs, some adventure. The physicality of the villain in this movie is unreal. Yeah. Like I heard that they use practical effects. They got like a couple, 2 or 3 people that could actually move like that. Yeah. So there were parts where I'm like, that's not CGI, because like, there's a part where the villain kind of goes into a hole that doesn't look like CGI, and I'm like, I know the way light hits CGI.
Yeah, that stuff was cool.
Unreal. Then there was the blocking in some of the shots where like she's running around in the film, and it almost feels like the Royal Tenenbaums. Like it's blocked out like some of his movies. Like it's like I just thought that some parts of it were so fucking fun, man. Like I thought I would hate this movie. It felt like I should have hated it, and then in the end, I'm like, the third act, because I just felt a little over the top, especially the deaths just felt too crazy. Like it's like if you were watching a comedy and someone was describing somebody getting hurt, like the stabs were like it was like, come on, like this is nuts. It's nuts the way these people are dying.
The brutality of that, I thought, was like, that was one of the few things that really felt Giallo to me, was like the brutality, the sudden, like the kind of like mutilation of the people, the sort of like the killer with like a black gloved hand with a knife, all that stuff felt very, very Giallo. I feel like it was missing that color palette that we were talking about.
Yes.
And it was missing some of that kind of art direction, but it did have that controlled style, and certain rooms seemed like they were set up for the sort of set pieces they became. Like the police station definitely felt like the police station in like an Italian, like in one of those Giallo movies. I mean, where it's like, why is the set direction so interesting here? Or why is this art direct? Like this is one of those, it's like almost like something on the television show Hannibal or something, where it's like, this is not meant to look like a real police station. But then when you see what that room is going to be used for later in the movie, you go, oh, they were kind of giving us this big wide open space because there's a set piece coming. Which again, that's that James Wan thinking. I think he loves to do as much as he can with the space, and even in this one, almost to an absurd level. That house really made no sense. The layout of that house, like when she falls through the attic. Well, I'm not going to say anything more.
Here's another thing. A real question before we spoil anything. Did the villain have a black belt?
Some kind of thing. Some kind of skill set.
Did the villain have a black? Was the villain Bruce Lee?
Something like that.
Was the villain Jet Li?
Did you? Maybe you didn't see the end of the movie. It was none of those people. It was something different than that.
I don't want to spoil it for you, Ronald.
Man,
you should go watch it before we talk
for
about
real, man. Like, I fucking love this movie.
Oh, wow.
I should not have loved it. At the end, Steve and John, I was like, I went upstairs and talked to Aaron, and I was like, I want to spoil this movie for you so bad. But it was so crazy from start to finish.
We had it was so fun to watch. Like Aaron watched it with me when I think we watched it Saturday night, and like the whole time she was like, did not want to watch it. Like she does not love watching horror with me, especially like later at night. She gets really scared. But like, like John said, it's not really that scary. But I mean, she definitely was like pretty into the movie. Like the whole time we were like guessing. She was guessing and like, and you know, some of the commentary that we're saying now, like that looks weird, or was that supposed to look weird like that? Why are they parking on the side of a cliff like that?
Oh, that car like that pulls up to the edge of the matte painting. It stops like right on the edge. See, that's what I mean, though. That feels like they have to be like in the room where they're compositing that shot. Someone has to be like, you know, sometimes as a joke, we put together this really exaggerated composition that doesn't look, and it's like, because there's no reason to ever do that with your car. But yes, that's a great example of what I'm talking about. That I think you can say that can't be an accident because you have to do that.
Yeah,
I think already though people are giving too much. I mean, my one thing would be, I don't think it bugs me when like you can't say a criticism about a movie and without someone going, oh, I think that acting was supposed to be intentionally bad. That bugs me because it's like, no, I think the version of the movie that had a more dynamic lead would have been better. It would have been more. It would have been more what this is trying to be. I don't think there's any reason why you would say, let's have a lead that is a vacuum of charisma. I don't ever think you would do that intentionally. And let's get some sort of amateur community theater folks to play the cops. I don't think you would do that unless, and you know, his new gal pal, his girlfriend is a wife. I didn't know that. But anyway, she's like got a story credit, and she's one of the like the forensics person who comes.
Yeah, they wrote the bones of the script apparently, like together.
Well, but I mean, it's a total nepotism thing because her character is strangely written and poorly acted and doesn't really have a place in the movie. That stuff was really clunky as hell for me. However, the stuff we're talking about, that's like those James Wan camera moves, that aerial shot of the house where she's walking around and you're just kind of getting hypnotized almost by it. Like it doesn't even make sense to lay the scenes out that way, but that's part of that Giallo thing too. Don't you think, Ronald? There's absolutely. Like excess. It's like, let's be excessive. Let's be excessive with the violence. In Giallo, frequently you're excessive with the sexuality too, which nowadays you don't really see in horror movies, but like, there's something about also the way this movie, another thing that tips you off to the self-parody, the satirical aspect, that she doesn't just have an abusive husband. she has the most cartoonishly brutish, abusive husband that's ever been. He like in shorthand, within 5 minutes, he's done 15 horrible things, you know, and
dirty shirt. He has a dirty shirt. He's like super aggressive. He's like
laying around watching the game. Whatever he says to her about, like, she's had miscarriages, and he says something like, how many of my babies are going to have to die inside you? And it's like, and then he throws her against the wall and shit. I mean, it's like, I'm not saying that's funny, but I'm saying the over the topness of that is so like what we're talking about. That's the kind of shit this movie tries to pull. That's like, okay, you can tell they're not operating with the usual rules.
There's a part in the movie where there's an investigation happening after the chaos happens, and the cop asks her about the miscarriages in front of her, like she isn't there. She's just like, yeah, so she heard she's had 3 miscarriages. Is that what? And she's just laying down in the bed. What? It just, that stuff has to be intentional, man. Like, I don't think that he would he would make all these brilliantly put together movies, and then he's just like, no, I'm gonna make this as campy.
I mean, you know, I do think directors can get to that point where nobody's second guessing them, though, and they get to make a movie that doesn't go through the usual whatever.
That's true too. That's true.
Yeah. But I mean, I think until we see James Wan in interviews talking about this movie and, you know, hearing stories about the making of it, I think that's when you'll determine, like, is it like a Tommy Wiseau situation where it's like, now that he knows people think it's funny, he's going to start to say, oh, I meant for it to be funny. But, you know, I think James Wan is a pretty direct guy. The only thing that I think is very interesting is that notion I expressed earlier is like, what does this do to like his name as a straight horror guy? Yeah. Maybe he doesn't give a shit about that anymore, or maybe he knows he gets to make his movies regardless, because at this point, if he wants to go off and make a $20 million horror film, he can do it. You know, no one's going to stop him. But it is interesting that the studio played along and played it so straight with the marketing and everything that even the commercials didn't tip their hand and say, like, this is crazy, this is wacky, this is wild. You know, they all tried to play it like this is the scariest movie you've ever seen. Like, at least all the press I saw was like scary as hell and all that stuff, you know?
And the weird stuff is that, like, you know, we talked about this a little bit last week, like they didn't screen it. And, you know, you wonder, did they not screen it because like they didn't like think the reviews would be good, or they wanted to try to preserve some of the twists, or, you know, the real movie that was going to be, you know, released. but also it's kind of weird that, like, you know, you like you just kind of were saying, John, like, him talking about it, like he didn't really do much press for this movie at all. Like, there wasn't really much press at all. And he usually is pretty visible when some of his movies are coming out, whether it's, you know, interviews or, you know, feature articles or podcasts, whatever. He usually kind of is seen a bit because he kind of is his own brand. You know, he's not just some directors who kind of fade into the back. Like, he's out there sometimes. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Like, there's like a little featurette that he's in on the HBO Max playlist at the end. You can watch. It's very brief, but I mean, like, that's the extent of like anything I've seen him talking about this movie, which I would like to see some more, but I haven't really seen many things that he's done in terms of interviews, just flat out discussing the production or, you know, the intent or, you know, what his goal was with the movie. But yeah, I don't know. That's probably what we can say, you know, before going into spoilers. I mean, I would definitely recommend checking it out. I mean, I think, you know, with the expectation that, you know, this is not a straight, like Ronald mentioned at the top, like I don't feel like really anybody should, you know, go in thinking that it's like a straightforward, like, new slasher horror epic that, you know, if you listen to this podcast and, like, you know, anything that we're saying sounds interesting, like, definitely check it out. And I mean, I would still be curious to recommend it to people just to have the discussion about it with them afterwards, like just for the good conversation, which is what I was saying earlier. Like, this is like a guaranteed conversation. Like, you know, it's not just like, did you like it? Oh, me too. End of conversation. Like, it's going to be like it's going to be a 10, 15 minute talk after you talk to anybody who's seen it probably. But yeah, I would definitely, you know, it's something I would definitely recommend checking out. But
yeah, when I first saw it,
would you guys recommend it? Or
my initial reaction was you know, if it had those better elements, the better acting, the sharper script, then I would be like recommending it to people as like a really fun kind of supernatural slasher type thing. But I think now that I've seen more people reacting to it, and I've seen so many people have latched onto the campy aspect of it, I would kind of up it to where you said, Steve, too. I would say, if you're a genre fan, you probably should check this one out because people are going to be talking about it, and you need to have an opinion about it. But I also think that I've been impressed to see how many people at least have reported, that experience that you guys said of like almost like in disbelief, laughing, enjoying this movie.
Yes. Yeah, there's a thing that I think can sometimes happen with people. I mean, none of you have expressed this. Where like sometimes you talk to people about movies and it seems like they're too good for a movie like this. Like it's too good to enjoy a movie that might not be it's not going to be like on your top 10 list necessarily. It might be on mine. Yeah, it might be on mine just because I could bring people around to watch this movie and we will all be screaming.
Right.
As we watch it. That's the thing. Like, have we forgotten sometimes that that's what brings us to movies is the feeling that you feel when you watch it, and not that is it high art, like, sure, I love that stuff. I love fucking artsy movies, but like,
hey, let's acknowledge you are Mr. A24. Okay.
Look, every time the shirt is in stock, it sells out.
They have the merch drop. Yeah.
I want the damn t-shirt. I am Mr. A24. We need to do this episode because more movies have come out at this point. Green Knight and Zola and stuff, but I love artsy movies, and this is fun as fuck. Like, are we getting into spoilers?
Let's do it. Let's say goodbye to our listeners who haven't seen the movie yet and don't want to have it spoiled for them. You have to go watch it and come back, or do what I suspect a lot of people do: just listen to the spoilers anyway, because they're here for us, not for these fucking films. Yeah. So-called films.
Or they just gave up on like, I'm not going to watch this movie. I just you can tell me everything.
Right.
Okay, so like, I think the opening of this movie tips you off that there's some kind of monster or creature or something. You can see something through the plastic that's hanging there, and you never forget that. I think that's another reason this movie plays on that level of letting you know that it's a little bit heightened, at least, because it doesn't start with the abusive husband and the dreary household and all that shit with the Impossible Four plan, and the attic that opens up onto the den that is basically straight up. Did you notice how high the ceiling was in that room that she falls? Anyway,
everything was so big in that house. Like, it was obviously big to shoot, but it was. She must have been a millionaire. It's very strange. Like, this is $1 million house easily. This is like a.
But on the outside, very quaint. But anyway, so it opens with that scene that I think really was there to say, sort of tip off that this movie is playing with these kind of B movie, the schlockiness of the monster behind the curtain and the scientists saying we've got to stop it and all that stuff. It didn't even play that as straight as it could have. It could have played it like Stranger Things level kind of straight.
Right.
It didn't do that. It didn't try to make that creepy at all. So that is letting you know, but then the movie does throw you into this, what we might think is kind of a James Wan, not just the James Wan heroine in the kind of story, but like the opening sequence, even the opening credits. I don't know how much that was, but it felt very much like, a 90s going into 2000s kind of, I don't know if you noticed that, the style of the music and everything. And then they have throughout the movie, a slowed down, eerie version of,
that theme
of the Where's My Mind, the Pixies song, or at least that's what it kept sounding like to me. And I was like, oh, are they doing that as a self-knowing thing too? Because that's kind of a cliche in these movies, is to take up a rock song and slow it down and make it eerie. So I was thinking from the beginning, like, this movie is something different. But even though I never forgot the monster behind the curtain, I was sort of I keep saying impressed about this movie, but it really did, like, oh, they're going there when it comes to what the creature actually is, where the creature actually resides. You might have guessed there was something going on like that, but I feel like when you discovered, why don't you tell us, Ronald, what is, who's the killer? This is a whodunit. You were talking about one of the traits of a Giallo is trying to figure out who did it. That's a really slasher trope too. Who is it? We find out close to the end, right? Who the killer is. And it's...
Can I tell you what I thought it was first?
Yes.
I thought it was just a twin. I thought this was like a situation where an adoption situation, one got adopted,
separated.
They're separated at birth.
I mean, you're right. In the Obi-Wan Kenobi sense of, from a certain point of view, it is a twin.
But little did we know, this person existed on her back. There was a person essentially residing in a.
She had a teratoma, and like in real life, the teratoma is when you have like a cyst, and it's got the twin that you absorbed in it, and it'll have sometimes like teeth or eyelashes or hair growing inside the cyst. It's gross, but this movie's view of that is what if a teratoma was like a little? It's kind of like Belial from the film Basket Case too. I don't know if people are familiar with that, but it's a very similar plot arc as far as how that's handled. But yes, it's the twin that was attached and now has been removed, or maybe they haven't been removed. Where's this twin been hiding all this time, Ronald?
Basically tucked in her head, essentially, right? They like cut off in her brain and have been controlling her thoughts. So essentially,
I love the shot of them pushing the brain. When they're explaining it, there's like a side shot of them like squeezing the brain. Like we couldn't remove it all. What was
crazy glue?
It was like the eyes or some of the facial features of the twin, the vestigial twin. We couldn't remove those without removing parts of your brain because it's grown into your brain. So then, just like boop, like someone trying to tuck. Like it's that thing where like you're putting sheets back in a drawer, but you're not folding them. You're just kind of stuffing them.
Or like Christmas, where you realize, oh shit, I don't have enough wrapping paper to go all the way around the box. So I'm just gonna press this in and then kind of.
We're gonna do a wrapping paper graft on top of this.
Yeah.
And we didn't realize we saw the triggering incident of this when her abusive husband throws her against the wall. Yeah. We didn't realize in the movie we were watching the moment when this happens. I thought that was kind of an interesting thing.
That's pretty cool.
Because after that, very shortly after that, is when Gabriel, who also for some reason can magically talk to you through the radios and make lights.
Yeah.
There's no explanation of that part, right?
No explanation for it.
He's just a mutant. Well, he also has super strength. Don't they allude to that later? That he's been like absorbing strength and she's able to use his strength.
That ties into your is he Bruce Lee, Jet Li, whatever.
Yeah. Right.
Jackie Chan, like it doesn't matter.
What kind of training did he
get? He just is.
Also very weird when Gabriel kind of went crazy in the hospital and she's trying to talk, the sister's trying to talk to the cop. She's like, look, her husband slammed her head against the wall and how did she know that Gabriel got activated? How could she ever have known? She guessed the plot of the entire situation right there in the hospital and kind of just gave it to us. And little did we know, the nasty, gruesome thing that we were watching in the beginning credits was the surgery of him being removed from her body. That's what it was, because they played it back later on in the movie.
All those weird close-ups and like fleshy stuff. Yeah. Again, a very like, I feel like every movie had kind of a disgusting opening credit sequence like that. Well, like maybe it was after Seven or some movie influenced everybody to have like enigmatic, creepy close-ups of kind of, disturbing shit. So that felt like a throwback too.
And when Gabriel comes from her head, the hair from the back of her head kind of drapes over Gabriel and looks very scary. And he has like a kind of scowl to his. You can't really see much. It just is kind of a fleshy.
It's his brain face. He's a brain-faced boy. And he's like the awkward movements that earlier we might have wondered, why does he move that way? We now realize it's because he's
walking backwards.
He's a backwards person.
Yeah, he's a backwards person. So
that actually was cool.
I thought it was so cool, man.
Like earlier in the movie, like when you know what's going on, or you see the twist. Mm-hmm. And then when you see those subsequent scenes of like, when he kind of takes her over, it really, it connects the dots of like, those movements that you're seeing, like you were describing earlier, Ron, like some of the practical stunts they did with like someone who could like recreate running backwards, or like when he pulls her arms out and like almost looks like they like dislocate in reverse. Oof. Like that kind of stuff. I thought that stuff was like actually really cool. And like before, again, the point of that was like before the twist, that's like an odd thing that you're like, well, what is that? Like, is that a creature? Like, because you're thinking like, is it like you're saying, like, is it a twin that's just like a slasher, or is this like some supernatural creature? Or it's just I think it's a interesting decision, because it does kind of keep you guessing, and it kind of really contributes to that like that mystery element of like, is it human, non-human, supernatural, whatever. And I don't think they ever really settle on one or the other, because like, even though you know what it is, and it's a pretty practical thing that, you know, for this movie, it sort of works, but the other elements of like the radio and the power and the kung fu and like, you know, the power, the lights flashing up, and I mean, you just say because
so
that's all. That's
because it's a horror movie, and also maybe there is some suggestion that this teratoma twin had some kind of mutant powers or some kind of psychokinetic something or something. Yeah. It's never explained, but it's like we're definitely in the realm where if you're buying all this other stuff to say, oh, he's also got some kind of psychic ability that can affect electricity, or he can, you know, they didn't bother over explaining why he can talk through the radio. So maybe we should be thankful about that, to say like, we accidentally threw a radio in your head too. You know, like they didn't try to explain that. But I do think that, it sort of works just on horror movie rules of like, well, this is just the kind of creepy shit that happens, and we're going to use radios in this movie.
I think the mother even makes a comment about him being like, it's a vague comment, like him being an abomination, and like some other phrase that she says that like probably in someone's mind is enough to say that'll explain why he can talk to the radio, you know, or like control the lights.
And do
but
karate.
It's also set up for a sequel very easily. I mean, there's this woman falls and hurts her head, and boom, Gabriel's back. So you know, and it's set up
this
at the
time
end.
She'll be ready,
right? But I mean, that feels totally like a here comes part two kind of vibe. But this movie, we should say, back to our earlier discussion, you know, it's. I feel like calling movies flops in this climate is strange, but underperformed might be the word you would use. This movie underperformed at the box office in the same way that like Suicide Squad did. It's just they were expecting more from this thing. So I don't know. I mean, you know,
underperformed on HBO Max as well. Like,
really? I haven't heard those numbers.
The opening weekend had about 700,000 streams, which is not good. I mean, they typically, you know, they normally aim for 1 million or over the weekend, for especially a new movie that's a day and date theater HBO Max release, and it had 700,000 streams, which is like a real flop. Like, unfortunately,
but this is one that I feel like catches on, whether it's
I think
in weeks or months from now, but years from now. I think this is one that really is going to have like a very passionate following an audience that is going to champion it for a bit. I think it only did 5.5 million or something like that.
That's
which is bad. But
I really, at some point, I hope that we can get James Wan. I don't know how we can do it, but I'm gonna try to get James Wan. We're gonna get James Wan on here.
You're saying you James Wan Tim on the show?
yes, and I need to find out why he gave that little man karate skills.
I want to find out whose idea it was.
That's really bothering you
to put the
so good.
In the doctor's house, the lady doctor that gets killed, on her mantle of trophies. John. There's a trophy that says "Excellence in Surgery."
Another point of this had to be intentional.
I mean, again, now that we've said all these things, it's like, that's because that's like almost like an Airplane movie level, like of like parody. But like there are, you have to believe that at least that kind of thinking was going into this movie. So it's like, whereas you might normally think, I think that it's a peril. I think anytime you watch a movie and you think you're smarter about the movie than the people that made the movie, it's dangerous. It might be, there are some movies that are made by people that aren't as smart as they think they are, you know?
Right.
And James Wan, I think, is a smart guy who sometimes makes kind of gut level movies that might be kind of dumb to some folks, but kind of, they hit you on that level. And I think that like when he's at his most successful, it's all those elements, his cinematic sensibility, his camera work, his everything. And so, I think that you like, it's almost like you could take it two ways. He doesn't have a lot in his history to indicate that he would make a movie that was this much of a satire of what it's trying to do. But he also, like you said, Ronald, he hasn't made a lot of movies that are like incompetently put together. So somewhere between those two, somewhere in that Venn diagram, there's a movie that really could only be made by James Wan. And I think that is something we come back to again and again when we talk about filmmakers that we admire or the types of movies we admire. So it's almost like, you can love James Wan or hate him, but you kind of have to begrudgingly tip your hat that he made a full-on James Wan movie that is like a very strange movie for a guy at this point in his career who's made the movies he's made to make this.
Yeah.
This, again, whether you want to say controversial, divisive, whatever, but just this, a movie that could really miss people with its tone, and people could really be like, not here for this type of movie, you know. That
seems like that. Yeah, it's kind of what
I kind of, you know, I think I dig that even more than I do the movie. I dig that. I dig that, the James Wan-ness of it, you know, that he's.
I think I wanted to mention I think what might be one of my favorite sequences in the movie, and one of those ones where you're just like, huh, was when she's with her sister and she's telling her about how she's adopted.
Mm.
And the moment that she says that she was adopted, the sister's face has like,
yes!
like, and then it cuts to an aerial view of Seattle at night with like an Evanescence song playing or something.
And I'm just like, right. No, it felt like,
I was like, did my HBO Max just glitch out or something?
Yeah,
like that.
It was so weird.
And but then, I mean, and again, I'm not trying to give too much credit here. When you realize who the person is in that next scene, it's the mother.
Yeah.
It kind of
right.
Yeah. Sort of ties to, I don't know.
No, you're right. Though that felt like a really weird edit, and it felt like, wow, are they demonizing adoption? Like there's this weird thing of like, wow, you're adopted. Boom.
Yeah.
I have a theory, man. This is what I was gonna say to you guys earlier. Remember how we saw Drive, Nicholas Winding Refn? We're like, man, can't wait to see what he has next. And then Only God Forgives came out. And he was like, you thought you liked me? Fuck you.
Now, I thought of that repeatedly with this movie because Steve very famously like hated that movie. And you and I were doing the, we think this was intentional conversation. Yeah. And we had some version of that. Just because it's intentional, does that mean it's valid? And like, you know what I mean? Like that discussion of like, if a filmmaker is trying to intentionally blow up their own reputation in a movie, like, do you have to salute that, you know? And I think in that movie, we kind of came down on the side of, no, you don't really have to salute it if you're not having fun with it, no matter how deliberate the director was. Oh, I wanted you to dislike it. You know, like that doesn't matter. On some level, you could still say that's bad. And I think this movie is a hell of a lot more fun in some ways to watch than Only God Forgives. But I had the same thought, Ronald. I was thinking constantly of like this conversation and going, oh yeah, the last time we talked about a movie that was on this level of like, what exactly is this director trying to do? It was that one, maybe. I don't know. I don't think I've been as mystified by a movie, or at least within the context of talking about it on this show. So
I would say that one, or not that it's the same, but I was going to say it made me think of what was it? The book of Henry.
Oh, the Book of Henry. Yeah.
You guys had the best. You guys had the best reaction to that movie. Like, it bothered me to the point where I didn't see it because of how poorly you guys reacted to it. It made me sad just hearing you guys talk about it. So I was like, I don't want to. I'm going to save my money.
I think that lost a man a Star Wars movie too. Like
it did. That is nuts. But maybe gained him another Jurassic World movie. So
that's true. That's true.
He's fine. Don't worry. He's fine.
Right. We don't feel sorry for any of these people that we talk about for the record.
No. All right, cool. Well, do you guys have anything else you want to say about Malignant?
See it.
Time to cut the cancer out.
Yeah.
You know what's also crazy? If you say that to the person that wronged you and they don't get it, they don't give a fuck about you. They forgot about you. She's like, huh? And then she's like, why did it take her so long? That was a crazy thing to say. And you would remember saying that to another human being.
Especially saying it like in a situation where you had like a mutant mutant being controlling the lights and the power and overpowering every person in your hospital.
Yes.
Well, see, that flashback was like 30 years before or 27 years, I think actually is the number they put on it. But
1990, 4?
Yeah.
3?
Yeah. For one thing, that they didn't age enough. Those doctors didn't age enough within that amount of time. But let's leave that aside. But also, like, there's plenty of years with which to play around with the other things that doctor was up to at that clinic. So you can maybe we'll get a little bit of an explanation of, like, you know, what other things she was doing that made her not so amazed by this this mutant you know, kid that she kind of forgot. Well, I say different things all the time when we kill mutant children. Which one are you? You know.
Yeah. I love the, like, yeah, the girl that we aged up, yeah, she just walked out of the door. What?
I know.
You saw the picture. I see you saw the picture on my desk.
Yeah.
Yes.
What? That feels like a scene that you know you need, and you're looking around and you're like, who do we have that's still on set right now? Okay, you come over here. What can we have these people say that we need to get out this piece of information, you know? No, that was like but again, in a movie where you're saying, oh, maybe this was all intentional, it's like, oh, the fact that it's a little clunky, if not on purpose, it certainly doesn't, like, it doesn't affect what we're talking about. Like, it only lends to the schlocky fun of this movie.
But to his credit, his drawing was spot on.
Yeah, that's true.
Steve, when you do an age up, they don't look you look exactly.
He is on a whole nother level. I mean, give that guy a ring. Did he survive? Did he survive? I don't even know if he lived. I don't know.
I don't think he was. I don't think
many people lived at that police station.
We'll just assume he had a really great last moment drawing, the most accurate aged up drawing ever in police history. Good.
How is it we haven't talked about, though, the not the police station itself, but the holding cell?
Yeah,
that scene.
Oh, the Royal
Rumble.
It's fucking insane. I mean, even the way it's shot, like, talk about this movie's given up on scaring you. This is like made. It's like, it's, you know, it's just like one person after another shows up, and also the women in the cell were these different types. That it felt very dated in a way, but like I guess they were supposed to be like streetwalkers and people that got picked up by the cops or whatever. But it just felt like the I don't know, just a very funny assortment of like easily recognizable women. So that
was one of them Zoe Bell?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
She was kind of the main one, the sort of main antagonist of the bunch. And they were really rough. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's a tough scene in there.
Yeah.
But no, that was insane. That scene was, but I mean, you could sort of feel like when you get to a scene like that, you go, oh, I sort of get it. I get why they made this movie. You know, like, this is what they were building up to. Like, and if anyone tells you this movie gets crazy, they're probably talking about like someone, their head getting stepped on and their eyes popping out kind of shit. Like, that's just over the top insane, you know?
Check.
Yeah. Now you've seen that.
You want to just kill a random a random gang member that isn't even trying to fight her, just gets pushed into the circumference of this danger zone, just like, what?
Yeah, super strength, throwing them across.
We just sold so many tickets for this movie, just so.
I guess we did.
So for your efforts for getting James, this will do a lot for those.
See that movie. Yeah.
All right, so Malignant's in theaters now. It's also, like we said, on HBO Max, and it's the standard. Like, it'll be on there for, I think it's 30 days or 31 days. So you have an option to see it there while you can. That'll do it for this episode. Movieschmovie.com is the website. You can find us any podcast platform we should be on, and you can link to all those from that webpage. We're on the social medias as well. All of them.com/movieschmovie, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, whatever it is. I'm sure, hopefully we're there. And like, Facebook also has this podcast feed that's working now. So you can even listen to the podcast through Facebook on the Movie Schmovie site. I don't know what we got coming up in the next week. I know next week, I don't think we'll see it in time, but Mike Flanagan's new series on Netflix comes out, the Midnight Mass. So hopefully,
cannot wait.
We can see that maybe next weekend and talk about that the week after. I don't know. We'll see what we can make happen. But there's a couple of movies coming out over the next week or so that we'll probably try to check out and, you know, get on the show next week. And eventually we need to finish our watch them all for Nightmare on Elm Street. One of these weeks coming up, especially in October. We'll get that done for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, man, that'll do it. Do you guys have anything else you want to mention before we get out of here? Besides, go see Malignant or check Malignant out while it's on HBO Max.
No,
nothing else. Okay. So, yeah. All right, good. As always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.